evening. Happy Friday. This is a Friday edition of Talking Sports with Evan. Few things I want to talk about here today and discuss. Some Milwaukee Bucks rumors starting to circulate, and with the NBA Finals over, of course, we heard nonstop for the last week on how the Bucks made a mistake in trading Jrue Holliday and basically trading Jrue Holliday to the Celtics, which the Bucks didn't trade Jrue Holliday to the Celtics, but enough people are seemingly thinking that happened, including somebody saying, well, they didn't do enough to assure that he didn't go to the Celtics. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Talk about the NBA Finals a bit. Talk about that. Talk about JJ Redick going to the Lakers and how I think that's just going to end in a disaster. And then talk some Milwaukee Brewers as well. The Brewers continuing to be in first place in the NL Central. And it seems like every week since opening day of the baseball season, we've been talking about the first place Milwaukee Brewers. So I'm going to discuss where they're at a little bit right now and some concerns that I am having, some trends that I'm seeing that worry me a little bit, and what they should do with Willy Adames. Because, of course, as the Brewers win, we hear more and more people talk about wanting to trade Willy Adames, or if they can't trade him, or if they should trade him, and whatever else you want to discuss. You can find Talking Sports with Evan anywhere podcasts are found. I will be posting this edition of Talking Sports with Evan shortly after I end the show. Publish it, and you can find it anywhere podcasts are found. You can find me on X or Twitter at Evan with Sports. You see it in the corner of the video screen for those watching the video. You can find it on YouTube and Facebook, Talking Sports with Evan. And for those wrestling fans, mostly WWE, I will be having a Facebook exclusive, not Facebook, YouTube exclusive show starting next week. Next Thursday is the plan, where I'll be talking WWE and professional wrestling in general. And I got a nice guest lined up to talk about some of the significant moments in professional wrestling that happened in the very city of Milwaukee. Should be a great and fun show. Lance Allen is who I'm looking to have on as of right now. It looks like it's a go, but he good historian. He was the sports director at TMJ4, and he's a historian when it comes to famous events that happened in Milwaukee for professional wrestling. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and going to give some thoughts and as well. So moving on. First topic of the day, the Milwaukee Bucks, more importantly, Jrue Holliday. Back towards the end of September, I want to say, I forget the exact date off the top of my head, it became official. The Milwaukee Bucks traded Jrue Holliday to the Portland Trailblazers and Grayson Allen to the Phoenix Suns, and in exchange, the Bucks got Damian Lillard. Shocked the NBA world. The Bucks were now the front runner of the 2023-2024 season with Giannis and Dame together on the same floor. Obviously, your defense is going to take a little bit of step back without Jrue Holliday, and it ultimately took a big step back, and a lot of that partially coaching, but some of that was the personnel and not having a guard like Holliday being able to play defense. Bucks, unfortunately, have injury issues with Giannis and Lillard and Middleton. And come playoff time, Giannis is not playing at all. Lillard misses 2 games, and Middleton's playing on two bad ankles. And they take the Pacers to 6 before they bow out. Also had a coaching change about midway through the season. Adrian Griffin let go. Joe Prunty coaches a couple interim games as head coach, and then obviously they hire Doc Rivers to be the coach for the next several years. And they've now since brought back Darvin Ham to be the top assistant for Doc Rivers. Fast forward to last week and even this week, the Celtics win the NBA title. Jrue Holliday has an outstanding game in the NBA Finals. Average games outside of that, but had a great game during the NBA Finals. And of course, you think people just completely lost their mind. And it was a huge mistake for the Bucks to trade Jrue Holliday. They should never have traded him. It was a mistake. They shouldn't have let him get to the Celtics, and just a wide range of opinions like that. I had one person I was going back and forth with on X for a while before I bowed out of the conversation because I was getting a headache, that the Bucks didn't do enough to ensure that Holliday wasn't going to go to Boston. I had people argue that they should have traded Brook Lopez or Chris Middleton in order to bring Dame Lillard to Milwaukee, and then you have Jrue Holliday and Dame Lillard together in the backcourt. And how great would that have been? But you're not wrong. It would have been great to have Jrue Holliday and Dame Lillard together in the backcourt, but it couldn't happen unless you don't make the trade or you trade number 34. Got to remember, Chris Middleton was a free agent at the end of last year. They just signed him to a new 3-year contract. So he was not eligible to be traded until January or February. So Middleton was a no-go in this particular situation, trying to get Dame Lillard. The other issue you had with Chris Middleton being the piece you use is part of the appeal to Portland was the fact that at the time of the trade, Jrue Holliday was in the last year of his contract, meaning you're bringing on an expiring contract, meaning it's a lot easier to then trade that contract to somebody else. So that was one of the appealing things about Jrue Holliday to Portland, because if they keep Jrue Holliday because they can't fire any suitors, we have him for a year, he's a free agent. Because he's on an expiring contract, there might be higher demand for his services from contenders. And it was unfortunate that smart move by Boston. Boston was smart in we need to bring him here. But you had no control, and you had the ability to have no control over where Jrue Holliday went after you traded for Damian Lillard. And things you got to take into account too. And I know I'm going to be accused of just towing the company line, and the front office is never wrong, and I'm a homer, and I have my Bucks goggles on. I can never criticize the team. My stance on Lillard and Holliday have always been the same. I'm thankful for everything Holliday did, but in order for the Bucks to try to get back to the NBA championship, changes had to be made to the core. And that meant moving on from Jrue Holliday. Jrue Holliday went to Boston, where it was the perfect situation for Jrue Holliday. He is a 4th or 5th option most nights because you have Tatum, you have Brown, you have White, you have Porzingis. He's usually a 4th or 5th option most nights. He doesn't have to be a scoring threat. He can kind of do his own thing out there. For the most part, he doesn't have to guard the number one playmaker all the time. You have Tatum and Brown for that. You have White for that. He can defend the 3rd, 4th, or 5th scoring option and save his energy for the 1 or 2 option and kind of pick his poison and not have to spend a lot of time there. Like I said, that was a great situation for Jrue Holliday. And he didn't have to score much. He could just stay in the dunker position and take passes and lay it in. Jrue Holdiay played his role perfect in his first year in Boston. And it was mainly because what his role was. In Milwaukee, he's the second or third option most nights, depending on if Middleton or Giannis are in the lineup or not, and how efficient Middleton is. Obviously, Giannis is the number one option anytime he's in the lineup, but then it was kind of depending on the night between Middleton and Holliday, and there were a lot of times the last 2 years, due to the unfortunate injuries to Middleton, that Holliday had to constantly be the number two option. We've seen Holliday basically his entire playoff tenure in Milwaukee on the offensive side of things show that that is not him. If the Bucks could have found a way to keep Jrue Holdiay in Milwaukee and have him be that fourth option on the floor, that would have been great, but it wasn't going to happen in Milwaukee. He didn't step up in the Boston series when Middleton hurt his knee against Chicago. He didn't step up in the second round of the playoffs, and his offensive game was atrocious. Against Miami a year ago, Giannis gets hurt in game one. I think first quarter game one, lands hard on the floor after Kevin Love decides he wants to undercut him and try to draw a foul. Giannis hurts his back, and Holliday gives you literally nothing on the offensive side. And the reason why you have Jrue Holdiay on the team is for his defense. He couldn't do anything against the Heat and Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler cooked him night in and night out in that series. He had 63 points or something like that in one game, most of it on Holliday. And again, it sounds like I'm being critical of Holliday. I don't mean to make it sound this way, but all the Bucks were stupid to trade him. This is why the Bucks didn't go to the NBA Finals. All of this conversation, this is why it sounds like I'm dogging on Jrue Holdiay. I don't mean to, but it's reality. It's a fact. He got destroyed by Jimmy Butler in the playoffs last year against Miami repeatedly. So the Bucks had to do something different. They made a coaching change. They let Budenholzer go, brought in Adrian Griffin, which didn't work out, unfortunately. And they had to make a roster change. And the only roster change they could really make was trading Jrue Holdiay, which they did. And they brought a top 75 player of all time to be on the floor with Giannis. Obviously, year one of the experiment didn't go as planned. Lillard wasn't in the best of shape for the first good portion of the season, as he wasn't really doing a ton of hard workouts due to knowing he was going to get traded. So he didn't want to overdo it and potentially risk injury, which would have avoided any trade. I wish he would have worked harder in the offseason, but what happened. There's no way around it. And then the Bucks dealt with injuries. If you take Jrue Holdiay, put him on the Bucks lineup in place of Damian Lillard, with the same scenario you had in the first round of the playoffs, it doesn't change anything. You weren't going to beat Indiana without Giannis. You just weren't. You pushed Indiana the best you could. You won game one strictly because of Damian Lillard. You won game five because of Chris Middleton going God mode. But you're not going to have Jrue Holdiay going for 30 points in the first half in an NBA playoff game. Yes, you're going to have Holdiay available more frequently. He probably doesn't miss 2 games in the NBA playoffs, but I don't think you beat Indiana by swapping out Lillard and Holliday. I don't think you beat Indiana. It was a bad matchup for Milwaukee, and without Giannis, it wasn't going to happen. Now, if you put Giannis in the lineup, like healthy with the Jrue Holdiay, you beat Indiana. But I don't know if you make a push for the NBA championship then. I don't know if you have enough to make a push for an NBA title with Middleton, Holiday, and Giannis. I don't know if you make that push. We saw the last two playoffs how ineffective Holiday could be come playoff time. And he had some great moments in the playoffs this year, but he was also very ineffective at times too. I think he was a minus 38 in the one game Dallas won, where Dallas just completely annihilated Boston in game 4. Yeah, game 4. So I would do the trade all over again. If I had the opportunity, I would still do it all over again. Would I have tried to get it done sooner so you're not spending most of the season trying to get Lillard in shape, and then he's dealing with groin and calf and hip and all these injuries because he's not in the shape he should be in. If you get him in sooner, you might avoid all those things. But it happened. It is what it is. It's unfortunate that Portland sent Holiday to Boston right away. But congrats to Jrue Holdiay, one of the nice people in the NBA, one of the guys you root for no matter what team he's on. Hey, he got another ring. Good for him. But now, how do the Bucks move on in 24-25? Obviously, Doc Rivers, you have a full offseason of him and what he wants to instill into the Bucks. You have Giannis hopefully getting healthy in Greece and trying to qualify for the Olympics. And you're going to have another year of two potentially young guys who you saw take some steps in this past year in AJ Green and Ajax. And Camp, going to be a big year for Marjan. He's got to put up or shut up time. But now the question is, what do you do? How can you try to improve this roster is going to be the big question. And news came out today, which has me having many questions. One of the pieces of news that came out today, first of all, is Malik Beasley is likely not coming back, which I ultimately think is not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing that Malik Beasley is likely going to put his take his talents elsewhere. I don't think it's a bad thing. Beasley did some good stuff for Milwaukee. He did some not so good stuff for Milwaukee. And I think it's perfectly fine that Malik Beasley is moving on. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think Beasley was a good pairing. I don't think Beasley was a good pairing in Milwaukee with Damian Lillard. He just wasn't. They're both kind of undersized guards who you can kind of pick on a little bit. And that's what you saw. So I think if you're going to move on from Beasley, you got to find a two guard that can complement Lillard and be able to be more of a defensive first type two guard. Either it be an Ajax taking that step, Camp taking that step, or what, or you bring in somebody else, or you draft somebody. The news that came out, not really news, but Brian Windhorst, who I'm not a big fan of overall, but he came out and had some quotes that came out that said that Doc Rivers is working really hard to make some roster changes affecting the, quote, core of the Milwaukee Bucks. When you think core of the Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis, Dame, Middleton, Lopez, Bobby, Patsy. That's the core for the Bucks. That is the Bucks core. So Giannis and Dame aren't going anywhere. They're safe. So when you're looking at what does that mean for the Bucks when they say the core, Middleton, who I would say is about 90% safe in Milwaukee, Lopez, Bobby, Patsy, and maybe throw Marjan in as a trade chip as well. So if Doc Rivers is looking to tinker with the lineup a little bit for the core, Bobby Portis and Brooke Lopez and Pat C are the three that are the most likely to get moved. And the question is, what can you really do to what can you really get if you move on from Brooke Lopez? And there's an article from Forbes that was written by Brian Sampson, who had some ideas on what you could do. And that is some ideas is you could trade Lopez to Toronto for Bruce Brown. This was floated around by O'Connor from The Ringer. Trading Lopez for Brown is a perfect match of salaries, and the Raptors could flip Lopez elsewhere. The amount of screening and cutting Brown could do in support of Giannis and Lillard will be glorious to watch. That is what the article stated from The Ringer. Trade Lopez to the Rockets for Steven Adams and Tari Eason. The Rockets tried signing Lopez a year ago. If you remember, last offseason, they tried signing him. They can always trade for him this time. And Steven Adams, the Rockets are going to grow with Lopez there. And Adams could anchor the Bucks defense and provide a little bit more athleticism at center. He's one of the strongest players and rebounders. And prying Eason out of Houston would be a home run for Milwaukee, is what the article in Forbes talks about. Eason is buried on the Rockets depth chart. He could be a valuable piece for the Bucks. And the move was also likely mean they consider trade Lopez in a separate deal. Also, you can trade Lopez to the Magic for Wendell Carter Jr. Wendell Carter Jr. is a young center from Orlando. The issue, it would put the Bucks under the second apron, which they need to try to get under. But you're kind of making Orlando stronger by sending Lopez there potentially. And but I don't know if I really want Wendell Carter Jr. Would I take him? I guess, yeah. But I don't know if you're going to be able to get him just for Lopez. He's 29 years old. He's a power forward center. He's 6'10", 270, so you do have some size down low with Wendell Carter, but you don't get a ton of points per game. He averaged 11 points per game this season. Career is 12.5. Does shoot 37% from three this year, so he could be your potential Lopez option. Basically replace Lopez. And you can trade Lopez and Chris Livingston for the Kings for Harrison Barnes and Davion Mitchell. So you'd be going small ball. Barnes is a small ball 4, and Mitchell is defensive-minded combo guard. You can play alongside Lillard or serve him as a backup. So those were the ideas that Sampson mentioned on an article on Forbes. I don't know if that, if any of those pieces are enough for just Lopez. You may have to throw other people in there, but I guess it's good to see that the Bucks are interested and wanting to work on improving the roster. I think that's a great thing. They're not going to stand pat and just say, hey, the only reason why we didn't go to the championship was of injuries, so we're just going to run it back how it is and see what happens. It's kind of what the Bucks did after they lost to Boston in 2022, a year after the championship when they got bounced by Boston in the second round. So the Bucks kind of did the same thing. They're like, well, if we would have had Middleton, we would have made the NBA Finals. So getting him back healthy, things are going to be fine. And they got bounced in the first round by Miami with injuries, and they didn't stand pat there either. So I like that the Bucks are thinking aggressively. They're limited. They have limited money to spend. They have limited options to try to improve the roster. And I think it's good that they're going to be exploring options on what they can do. But things that made me go, is Brian Windhorst's article or comment state that Doc Rivers is looking to change the Bucks core, shake up the Bucks core a little bit. Doc Rivers is looking to do that. Last I checked, and I might be wrong. I know there's rumors John Horst was potentially going to go to Detroit after this season. But last I checked, the general manager of the Milwaukee Bucks is John Horst. Doc Rivers is the head coach. Now, if Rivers and Horst are working together to try to reshape this roster, okay, got you. Awesome. That's great. However, if Doc is the one who's now in control of personnel and he's going to form the roster how he wants to form it, why the hell did you block John Horst from interviewing in Detroit? It literally makes no sense to block Horst from being able to go to Detroit if he's not even making decisions from the front office anymore. He's the general manager. It's his job to form the roster, and it's Doc Rivers' job to coach it. Now, in a perfect world, the head coach and the GM work well together, and they communicate, and that's how they operate. But Doc coming out saying that Doc wants to shake up the roster a little bit from the core Bucks players outside of Giannis and Lillard, that's a little concerning to me because do we have too many people trying to run the Bucks? Do we have too many people trying to be personnel guys? Do we have too many people trying to be general managers? And again, it goes back to what I said. Why did we block John Horst from going to Detroit if Doc Rivers is going to have the power over the roster? I think that's a very good question. I think that's a great question that people need to start looking into a little bit. Who is making the decisions in Milwaukee? Is it Doc or is it John Horst? Who's making the decisions? And I think that could have a big say on what we see happen to this roster moving forward. The other things that came out is the Bucks are looking for more versatility on defense, which would make you think Brook Lopez could be an odd man out. But it also means you could, if a Kevin Ware falls to you in the draft in the first round, you could always take Ware, have him learn, get quality minutes, but ultimately, learn from Brook Lopez for a year and then have him take over as a starting five next year. That could be a potential option too. So I was going to talk some Brewers. Don't really going to have time to do it. But Monday, just got confirmation. Monday at 8 o'clock, going to have Dan Zielinski on the show. He's been a friend of the show. I think I've had him on every year for the past couple years talking MLB draft. The MLB draft is coming up, and he's going to talk about prospects that the Brewers could be looking at in the draft, and also talk about potential prospects the Brewers could potentially move in trades, how to make the roster look better. So with that said, I am going to end it here, as I prefer not to try to go over the 30-minute mark, especially when I'm by myself. I'm going to talk Milwaukee Brewers on Monday, and then Thursday, going to talk YouTube exclusive. So make sure to subscribe to the Talking Sports with Evan YouTube channel. It's going to be a YouTube exclusive WWE/wrestling show where I'm going to be spending the first show talking about big moments in wrestling that's taken place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. With that said, talk to you all next week. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you later. Have a great one, everybody.